We're here in the beautiful Amsterdam with blockchain talks, and one of the speakers is Kyle Asman. Very interesting talk. Kyle, could you please introduce yourself? What do you do?
Yeah, so I'm one of the co-founders of BX3 Capital, and BX3 Capital helps clients raise capital, legal, accounting, tax, and helps them navigate the regulatory environment to kind of take people's ideas to operating businesses. So we help them through pretty much every stage of the process, both in the US and internationally.
So your clients are ICOs?
Yeah, our clients are ICOs that are in the process, ICOs that are getting ready for the process, and ICOs that are past the process that are looking to build their brand and acquire users and kind of ramp up the business aspect of it.
How do you see the ICO market? We've seen in 2018 still growing actually.
Sure, yeah, I think there's a lot of growth there. And I think there's a lot of strong companies and good ideas that come out of it. One of the problems I have is a lot of these companies that issue utility tokens specifically don't have a use case for it yet. So if you issue something and there's no use, you're just praying that a market's going to buy it. And a lot of times that doesn't happen, especially when Bitcoin and Ethereum are down and people don't have that free capital to put in there. Then it just kind of sells them off. But as you start to see these better and better projects like a Binance coin, the price goes up because there's a real utility for it. So that's okay. And same thing with security tokens. They're backed by equity or they're paying you a dividend. So there's intrinsic value behind it. There's just a lot of projects that don't have a lot of value right now. But I think the market this year is ultimately going to end positive, and it's going to continue to go up as adoption grows. Adoption is really low. That's the key.
All right. How do you determine if ICO is the right client for you? Do you have all these sets of criteria? Or?
Sure. So, the first thing we do is really diligence on the team. And it's, are these the right guys to pull off whatever their idea is? Because that's the first. If the people aren't right and we're not going to work well together, it's excluded right there. And then, we really ask, what's the problem they're trying to solve? Is their solution the right solution? And then if they're trying to issue a token and do an ICO, we consider, what does the token do and why does the token have value and why do you need it to make sure that the tokenized model is the right one?
Actually, during your talk, you talked quite a bit about regulation. What do you see in the U.S. market? It's heavily regulated. ICOs are forbidden still. How do you see this evolve?
Yeah, so ultimately, I think there's going to be a global framework come into place. I'm actually hoping the U.S. doesn't take the lead on this one because I think it would be too repressive to business. I'm hoping that countries come together and, the rest of the world's like, hey, this is the framework we're going to put in place, and it's going to allow people to grow and thrive. When the U.S. passed the Jobs Act, that was the idea behind it. It was going to allow these companies to grow and thrive and make it easier to raise capital. And, with the ICO thing, people have found an easy way to raise capital, but the SEC always finds a way to make it tougher. I know they're trying to prevent people from fraud, but sometimes it's too much and it stifles growth. And in this case, that's what's happening.
Is a global framework, is that really feasible?
In the short term, the answer is probably no, but you see some great steps out of Antigua, you see great steps out of Malta, Gibraltar, countries that are trying to come up with a framework that works. And this is just a different type of beast than we've ever dealt with before because the nature of it's just so global.
Yeah. And for ICOs, talking about the US, we can also talk about the ETF fund, of course. How do you see? The SEC pretty well, probably. So, what do you expect?
I expect to see an ETF happen in the United States. When that'll happen is really up for debate. I hope it'll happen by the end of September, but the key is custody. When the SEC feels confident that the dollars are going to be safe, they're going to approve the ETF. It's going to happen. There's going to be an altcoin ETFs. There's going to be Ethereum ETFs. It's just a matter of time and a little bit of a waiting game till that custody solution really gets there.
It can be a really propeller effect, on the market. We've seen it in gold markets.
Yeah, so when the gold ETF came out, GLD came out in the early 2000s, the price of gold increased 350%. So, if you see that type of reaction in the crypto markets, Bitcoin's going to go well over 20,000, which is where some really good analysts have pegged it for the year. So, I think that's part of what factors into their conclusion. Tom Lee and Tim Draper both think that it's going to end in that range. And without an ETF, it'll be really tough because the market and the fundamentals are probably still be depressed, short of major regulation coming out that makes it a lot easier to issue tokens.
All right. Yeah, one of the arguments of Tim Draper is that the dollar becomes less worth. Do you expect the same or?
Well, if you look at the inflation in the U.S., it's 2% a year. So your money's actually becoming worth 2% less. I mean, the inflation rate's 2% and the standard interest rate's like 1% if you're putting your money in the bank. So by keeping it in the bank, you're losing money year over year. I understand the dollar value is getting higher, but the buying power is getting much lower. And with cryptocurrency, I mean, if you bought it in its advent, your buying power has gotten much, much higher. And so, I mean, I think that a non-state run asset. I mean, if you look at the debt per person, I mean, the debt per person is over $59,000 per person in the United States. It's crazy. There's going to reach a point where they can't print any more, they can't print any more money, and they're going to devalue the dollar. I mean, we've seen it happen in China, which is why that flow of Asian dollars is going into crypto.
That's really true. I mean, talking about, lots of questions pop up, but the security tokens, I mean, I think we can count them on two hands in the US market. So what's the future of these security tokens? We spoke to Overstack, this guy from Overstock, sorry.
Overstock, T0. Yeah, I mean, the problem is, I mean, they're trying to get T0 set up, Verbex is trying to get set up, and Templum has some licenses, but they haven't quite set up yet. There needs to be an exchange. If there's no secondary market for them, it can't thrive, because then it's no better than venture capital. Your money's tied up in this investment that's not liquid, and that's what nobody wants. So it's kind of a chicken before the egg type of scenario. People are ready to issue, but there's no exchange. So it's tough to get those dollars in. And a lot of the people who have been raising for security tokens have had a lot of trouble in their raise, and that's the biggest answer. Why would I buy this when I could buy something that's totally liquid in 6 weeks or a month from now?
All right. Will Coinbase touch that market, or?
I believe that Coinbase will touch the market. So the way I envision Coinbase growing is, now that they have their broker-dealer licenses and banking licenses and all their money transmitter licenses, I think that they're going to proceed and be more like a NASDAQ style. I mean, where we see exchanges now where I've dealt with them, you can't get them on the phone and their fees are ridiculous high. Coinbase is going to come out and they're going to set a criteria for listing. And if you meet that criteria, there might be some setup fees, there might be a set fee involved, and then they're going to get your token on their trading exchange. They're trying to be the biggest, they're trying to be the NASDAQ of crypto. Of course, before NASDAQ comes in, I mean, they need to have a first mover there.
Yeah, and then you have ICE. I mean, that was quite a big factor. ICE is also coming into the space. I mean, they want to develop this crypto ecosystem. Do you know more about it? This bucked.
Yeah, so they've got some buy-in from Microsoft and some other institutional partners, because they see a real need for a tokenized economy. So, when you start talking about institutional money like that, they can get things done quick. So, I mean, you really have to act fast if you're a company like Coinbase, because I know they have a good valuation and a lot of capital backing them, but I mean, they're not in the same big leagues as Microsoft and the big players. And backed would be great. I mean, it was some really positive news that kind of got overshadowed by the decline, by the ETF delay. Yeah, that was unfortunate.
It's quite positive. I mean, it's ICE. I mean, and do you expect? Yeah, we're just talking lots of topics, but I mean, actually, the advisor of Coinbase went back to Facebook. So, do you expect anything from Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I do expect something from Silicon Valley. And, I think about a company like Apple or Amazon issuing a token. And I mean, your standard merchant in the United States is paying 2.5% a year on credit card transaction fees. So, I mean, Amazon and Apple of the world probably have negotiated a little rate around 1 or 2%. But if Apple does, $100 billion in revenue a year, and they're paying 2.5% or even 1%, that's $1 billion. If they issued a token, everyone would want it because it's backed by Apple. They could just recycle it, and people could pay for it with no processing fees, and it would save Apple a ton of money, and they'd be able to have a lower price point on their product or pad their earnings. So I think that we're going to see some people like that. I mean, I knew, for McDonald's, the 50th anniversary of the Big Mac, they have the Mac coin. It's not quite a cryptocurrency yet, but I wouldn't doubt that it's a pilot or a dry run at it.
It's a utility. You can use it as a utility.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that they're piloting it. I mean, we've had discussions with a number of enterprise-grade businesses that have considered it, and they just haven't figured out the right way to integrate it for them. But I think it's definitely in the discussion.
Even for you guys, I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, if you could advise these big companies, I mean, you got the knowledge now. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of one of the things people look for in the space. I mean, there's a lot of great big consulting firms, tax firms, advisory firms out there. But if they don't have experience in the market, you're paying them to learn on your dime. So, I mean, that's one of our biggest advantages, that we're a first mover, and we've been one of the first to the market and really established ourselves. And, everybody in our firm has had successful careers in the past and just applied that to cryptocurrency, which makes us pretty unique.
Do you trade yourself, or
trade, yeah.
You're a trader, hodler?
I'm a trader, I'm a holder, and I'm an active investor. So, I kind of have a philosophy to hold on to Bitcoin forever because I think there's just a ton of value there, and I think we're going to see it go much higher. I like to trade Ethereum because the volatility is just great. And then there's some ICOs I like to hold. I like to, invest in the pre-sale and then get out. It really depends on the project, but I'm pretty active in a lot of them.
The prices are amazingly low. I mean, for instance, Icon is like ICO price almost.
Yeah, I mean, especially, so Buy Box requires, their tokens for listing on the exchange, and having, that great presence that they do in China and that the growing exchange model, you need their tokens to list. So that's one of the things, especially, it was at 91 cents and it was a pretty good price back in June, and now it's at 47. So, looking at something like that, it looks like a pretty attractive opportunity. I mean, even if it reverts to the mean, it goes to 75%, that's still, 50% upside on your investment.
I mean, so the model of the Binance coin will be copied by other exchanges, of course. I mean,
yeah, it's been such a successful model. I mean, Binance had higher earnings last year, or higher revenue last year than Deutsche Bank. I mean, a company that's been around for over 100 years versus a company that's been around for a couple. I mean, and you look at Bitmain, they got an $18 billion valuation. I mean, that puts them in the top half of the Fortune 500 as a public company. I mean, yeah, they have the potential. I mean, they're making $2 billion in revenue a quarter. I mean, the numbers they're putting up are incredible. And I mean, that's the future. That's the future of the new economy.
You don't believe in Bitcoin, actually.
They what?
They're more
Bitcoin Cash fans. Yeah. They're big believers in Bitcoin Cash. Yeah. I don't think there's enough time for there really to be a right or wrong answer. I mean, it's still to be determined. I mean, there's no Apples, there's no Googles, there's no Facebooks yet in the space. Everything's still TBD.
Yeah, still Netscape. It was before Netscape, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I saw an article today that compared Ethereum to Yahoo and EOS to AOL. So, I mean, those might be two of the busts. That might be the pets.com. We don't know, but I do know that the cryptocurrency is going to be here for a number of years. It's a multi-decade story. It's not a just right now thing. It's going to be going on for decades.
All right. Thank you very much, Kyle, and all the best. So, if people are interested in your company, which website or Telegram?
BX3.io, and more than happy to shoot me an email directly at kyle@bx3.io.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.